So, good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome. I'm Professor Leah Cowan, Vice President, Research and Innovation and Strategic Initiatives here at the University of Toronto. Before we begin, I would like to share a land acknowledgement recognizing the unique and enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. I wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I am delighted to be here today. On behalf of the University of Toronto, I want to extend my sincere thanks to each of you for joining us for the Desjardins Speaker Series. We have a truly inspiring panel discussion here for you this afternoon. So first, I would like to thank our lead partner, Desjardins. Their ongoing critical support for innovators is incredibly impactful to the future success of entrepreneurship at the University of Toronto by capitalizing on our global research capacity, our deep talent pool, and our unmatched entrepreneurship and innovation network. Join me in extending a warm welcome to the representatives from Desjardins joining us here today. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Wesley Ladouceur, Vice President, Commercial Banking, Desjardins Ontario Credit Union. Based in Southern Ontario, he is a commercial banking professional with over a decade of experience and a solid track record of driving business growth and fostering lasting relationships with clients to help them achieve their goals. He played a pivotal role in significantly growing the credit union's commercial portfolio and has assisted countless clients in securing financing, streamlining their operations, and increasing profitability. Please welcome to the stage, Wesley Ladouceur.
It's nice when you hear someone talk about you like that. No. Welcome everyone. I'm Wes Ladouceur of Desjardins. Honestly, it's a huge pleasure to be here with you all today as part of the Desjardins Speaker Series. I was telling John backstage there that in September, when I was here for Accelerator Fest, I couldn't wait to come back to campus. I left here so inspired, and I gotta say, there's certain things that stuck with me, and it's so nice to see. That's what we do on a daily basis. We're here to support entrepreneurs, and that's exactly what UT is doing. And I'm not just saying that because it gets me away from all the paperwork and out of the office. I really love being here. We're super lucky at Desjardins to have this fantastic partnership with the University of Toronto. It brings together creative students and amazing entrepreneurs like Catherine and Jim. I'm really looking forward to hearing about their journeys and what they've learned along the way. Right after that fireside chat, we'll get to hear from 4 amazing startups, and I was just able to meet them out in the hall, and again, super inspiring. I hope to work with them in the future, so looking forward to hearing from them as well. During my time at Desjardins, I've had the chance to connect with many aspiring entrepreneurs. And I can tell you, just like I said last time, what we find is that they're looking for mentorship and guidance. And that's exactly what UT is doing on a daily basis. It's simply amazing. In Canada, we need that entrepreneurial spirit now more than ever. I was just this morning at the Globe and Mail office in Toronto, and I was there for the global economic outlook for the next few years. Every single speaker, everybody on the fireside chat was speaking about innovation, was speaking about automation, and it's so important. Canada is making waves in fields like AI and quantum computing, which is amazing. But it's not just about the tech. There are so many entrepreneurs out there creating physical products, and it's meeting the needs of the changing global markets. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Catherine and Jim. Their journeys give me a lot of hope for the future, and I'm sure you'll find them inspiring as well. A big thank you to the University of Toronto for making today happen, and thank you everyone for being here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Wes. So it's a very exciting time for entrepreneurship at the University of Toronto. Startups from U of T in our community have incredibly secured more than $3.5 billion in investment over the past decade. They have created more than 700 venture-backed companies, and they have generated more than 10,000 jobs. In fact, the University of Toronto is Canada's top university for research-based startups. Just 2 weeks ago, U of T received the award for Outstanding Contributions to Venture Creation from the Global Consortium of Entrepreneurship Centers, joining previous winners from institutions such as New York University, Stanford University, Cornell University, and Yale University. Today, U of T is in an amazing period of growth as we build our recognized leadership in a range of areas, from artificial intelligence and machine learning to consumer retail manufacturing and sustainability. Canada has a very long legacy of successful entrepreneurship in retail and consumer goods and manufacturing, from the popularity of Research in Motion's BlackBerry to Canada Goose's industrial coats for Arctic weather, translating into a common wintertime staple. Here at U of T, startups such as Viva Crop Protection, Xanadu, and Altex are manufacturing products to address key demands in agriculture, quantum computing, and retail packaging. Today, innovators are leveraging cutting-edge technologies such as AI and machine learning to manufacture products that are passionate for our people to meet the needs of a dynamic global marketplace. Two stellar examples of entrepreneurs who are excelling in this space are the iconic leaders Jim Estelle and Catherine Homuth. We'll be hearing from them shortly. Catherine is a familiar face in our ecosystem through her involvement with the Creative Destruction Lab, a leading global seed stage program for science and technology startups at the Rotman School of Management. They have both had great success and a wealth of experience in scaling up businesses and growing them into globally recognized brands. And I'm sure that we're all looking forward to hearing more about their fascinating entrepreneurship journeys in a few moments. Some basic housekeeping before we dive in. If you haven't entered our raffle draw yet, now is the time to do so. Scan the QR code on the screen for a chance to win an incredible prize pack provided by our startups and inspiring speakers. Raffle entries close at 1, and I note that this is what's at stake here. So sign up. Make sure you stay to the end of the event because winners will be drawn at that time. And a quick reminder to all of our startup founders in the audience. Applications to the Desjardins Startup Prize, which offers over $100K in prize funding, are due this Friday, so don't miss the opportunity. Now, I'm excited to introduce our moderator for today's fireside chat. Christian Sigurdsson is the Managing Director of Endeavour Canada, where he drives the organization's mission to identify, support, and accelerate high-impact entrepreneurs. Endeavour Canada plays a vital role in the growth of late-stage ventures by equipping them with the resources they need to scale their businesses and create lasting impact. Before joining Endeavour, Christian served as the program director at U of T's Creative Destruction Labs, or CDL. Since his tenure, CDL expanded from a single office in Toronto to 11 locations across 6 countries, with over 2,900 participating ventures and $28 billion in equity value creation. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Christian.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, let me just make sure I'm standing right. The one thing that I'll mention, it's not mentioned on the screen about the raffle, is Jim told me that he will help you carry this fridge to your house after. So it's a special experience. As Leah, thank you so much for the introduction. I am Christian Sigurdsson, the Managing Director of Endeavour Canada. It's a privilege to moderate today's conversation with two incredible entrepreneurs who've made significant contributions to entrepreneurship and innovation in the country. Our first guest, Jim Estill, is an entrepreneur and philanthropist. He grew a technology startup into a $2 billion business and now leads several companies, including Danby Appliances. His companies produce everything from air conditioning units and mini fridges to snow plows and the air-supported domes that many of you might play tennis or soccer in during the winter. Jim is a founding board member of BlackBerry and an author of 2 books on time management and branding. He's also deeply committed to humanitarian efforts such as sponsoring Syrian refugee families and founding the Circle Home Furniture Bank. Jim is a board member at Endeavour Canada. That's where I get to spend most of my time with him, where he helps guide the organization and identify the top companies and entrepreneurs in the country. His contributions more broadly have been recognized with the Order of Ontario, the Order of Canada, and EY's Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And it's actually really hard to keep on top of all of Jim's awards, as just within the last month or so, he was awarded an honorary doctorate from the University of Waterloo and the King Charles III Coronation Medal from the Office of the Secretary to the Governor-General. Joining Jim is Kat Homuth, one of Canada's newest Endeavour entrepreneurs, another subtle plug, selected just earlier this year. Catherine is founder, CEO, and chair of SRTX, a leading material science and manufacturing company in North America. SRTX is best known for SheerTex, the world's strongest rip-resistant tights, which have become the top-selling tights brand in the US. SRTX employs over 300 people across 2 factories in Montreal, and Catherine has raised over $200 million US in funding, previously founded and sold 2 other companies, Shop Locket and Female Funders, and she's also the author of Funded, an entrepreneur's guide to raising your first round, as well as being an active mentor and angel investor. Catherine's achievements have earned her recognitions also from Forbes 30 Under 30, Canada's Top 40 Under 40, Canada's Top 100 Most Powerful Women, and the Governor-General's Award for Innovation. She's also a graduate, as mentioned, and now a mentor of the Creative Destruction Lab, which is actually where I met her some years ago. So Jim and Kat bring exceptional experience and insights from scaling global businesses to fostering innovation. I've had the privilege to work closely with them for several years now, and I'm delighted to have them here with us today. Please join me in welcoming both Jim Estill and Kat Homuth to the stage. Please, take a seat. Well, thanks again so much for you guys taking the time to be with us today. I'm going to start with you, Kat, and take us back to the basics of, each of you have built businesses, you've scaled businesses, you sell products overseas, but tell me a little bit about the experiences that drove you to start your first company and what drove you to start SheerTex.
Yeah, so I think I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur fairly early in life. It was probably in middle school, high school, that I knew that was where I wanted to go. But I think it ultimately came from the fact that I sort of looked around at people that I admired, and it seemed like there was this common denominator that the people that I admired built things. They had ideas and they managed to somehow take those through to some sort of fruition. So I started very early on surrounding myself with lots of entrepreneurs. Events like this would be exactly the sorts of events that I would have attended to really just learn what it took. I didn't have any great mentors or people in my life that kind of could show me what entrepreneurship was, and even the word entrepreneurship probably wasn't part of my early vocabulary, but in going to events like this, in meeting entrepreneurs, I really kind of threw myself into that ecosystem very, very early on, and very quickly couldn't imagine myself doing anything but trying to find the idea and trying to get it to actually exist in the world. And I had many, many, many false starts. I will probably have many, many false starts going forward too. But I think there's just something about the highs and lows of entrepreneurship that to me in particular are very, very addictive. And I like to be on, the cutting edge of just what's gonna come to the world. And that's why entrepreneurship has really spoken to me.
And maybe just to add on, what brought you to start SheerTex now?
Yeah, so ShareTex came after an experience where I had sold my last business to a very large manufacturing company. The company was based mostly out of Shenzhen, but they had operations in San Francisco and Ireland as well. And I'd gotten to be part of a lot of very interesting conversations with people that were building physical products, mostly Internet of Things devices that were, the connected chair, the connected oven, the connected watch. And it was interesting. These were very, very smart people, but so many of the products just seemed to be what I would call technology for technology's sake, and it didn't really seem to solve a consumer problem. And coming off the back of that experience, I really wanted whatever I did next to just start with a problem first, and then figure out if technology could solve it. And pantyhose is the absolute last thing I think I ever would have expected myself to get into, but in the process of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, this problem caught my attention mostly because it was so boring. It was so obvious. How do we have self-driving cars? How do we have space travel? But a simple pair of pantyhose to just last a day didn't exist. And it ended up pulling me down this rabbit hole of literally like Alibaba and Amazon and patent research to try to figure out, was there a way that you could do this differently? And it took about 6 months to get a fairly solid hypothesis on how you could do it. And at that time, I was pursuing a whole bunch of other ideas, didn't expect this would be the idea that actually, ended up being the one I pursued. But really became certain that if you took materials from other industries, much stronger polymers, and turned it into the type of fiber you could use in tights, you could actually produce something that was much, much stronger. And our very first prototypes used yarn that cost like $2,000 a spool, which is like almost 2 orders of magnitude more than you would normally spend on nylon. They were white, they didn't stretch, they basically looked like cheesecloth, but they were insanely strong. And it was those early prototypes that gave me enough confidence to say, okay, like if we actually put our minds to it, we can probably solve this. I thought it would take 6 months. It took about 2 years to get to anything worth shipping. But that was really the genesis of how this started. And it really was as simple as, can we just find a problem and then figure out how we would solve it, really first principles.
Thank you. And I've heard this story in different incarnations so many times, and it's incredible how long that path is that you took to get to where it is today. I've done 2 tours of Kat's factory, her newest one in Montreal that opened this year, and it's an unbelievable technological marvel. And to think that it started with ordering fibers online, from China and trying to see if they would work, it's just an unbelievable transformation. Jim, I'd like to turn to you and ask you kind of the simple question of what drove you to start along your entrepreneurial journey, and then fill in some of the gaps to how you then became CEO and owner of Danby.
So I was in university studying engineering. I wanted to design circuit boards. To do that, I needed a computer. And back then, computers were expensive, but I got a better deal if I bought 2. So I bought 2 and I sold 1. Then someone wanted a printer, then someone wanted a disk drive, and then memory. And next thing you know, I'm buying and selling computer hardware, software, and peripherals, and designing circuit boards. And that circuit board design company, at one point I ran out of space, didn't have enough space for my computers and my circuit boards, so I split that company into another company called Connect-Tech, which is still in business today, and we sold it recently to Heiko. Small company, they have like 140 people. But I was able to eventually grow my computer distribution business to a couple $2 billion in sales. While I was doing technology distribution, I was distributing technology, I would see a lot of technology. And I would invest in a number of those startups. So I invested in over 150 of those startups. The most famous one was mentioned, was BlackBerry. And so I was one of the founding directors of BlackBerry and served on that board for 13 years. And then I did what I thought I was supposed to do. You grow your business to a certain size, you sell it for a lot of money and you retire. I was retired, but I didn't really love it. And I sat on the board of Danby Appliances and whatnot, and then the CEO resigned. I said, okay, I'll go in and run it for 6 months. And I started running it for 6 months. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to run a company. And then the ownership group asked me to sell the company. I said, how much for? And they told me, so I said, okay, fine, I'll take it. That's how I ended up owning Danby Appliances. And I view Danby sort of as a platform that allows me to buy other businesses and to do other businesses. So that's how I ended up with Danby.
That's incredible. I love how you just throw away, it was a small company that I sold a while back, 140 people. That doesn't sound small to a lot of the entrepreneurs in the room probably that are at the early stages, but it's a testament to just how active you've been for decades in entrepreneurship. I'd love to transition into a question that I've been debating internally. It's been in the news a lot recently. Kat, I think you've been on a panel recently at the Logic conference talking about this, surrounding Canadian ambition. So, the story goes that Canada has a reputation for producing world-class talent, yet there's this conversation recently popping up around whether we as a country have sufficient ambition in our entrepreneurial ecosystems. And I want to ask you, Kat, do you think this is an issue? And if so, what do you think might drive more ambition among Canadian founders?
Yeah, I think that it's 100% an issue. And I think it's an issue for a few different reasons. I think that when you talk to most entrepreneurs in Canada, they are trying to become a successful entrepreneur in Canada. And that in and of itself is like shrinking your pool of people that you're comparing yourself. Like the most successful businesses, the most successful entrepreneurs in the world are not in Canada. And if we are going to be a globally competitive country, we have to start performing in globally competitive ways. And the only way we can do that is if we compare ourselves against the rest of the world, not against the person next door. And so in order for us as a country to be, economically prosperous into not just this decade, but the decades to come, we need entrepreneurs that are looking to compete globally. That means you need to be willing to build companies that are global successes on a global standard. So no matter what industry you're in, I would say challenge yourself to not create a peer group of the University of Toronto or Canada or even North America. Create a peer group of the best thinkers in the entire world. And the world is so connected, whether that's through the internet or through planes or whatever the source might be of getting connected. Get yourself to those people and make that the bar of conversation that you're having. Make that the bar of ambition. And I think we will see a completely transformed generation of Canadian entrepreneurs. For myself, when I was very, very young, just the first time I got on a plane to Silicon Valley changed me. I do like to say there's actually something different in the air. You walk around Mountain View, you sit in a coffee shop, and every single table is someone pitching an idea, and the ambition is palpable. And it's very, very, very hard to replicate that anywhere else in the world. And that's just one example, but how do you actually look at, building? I think it starts with a peer group. Who do you compare yourself to? And yes, there's a lot of, reasons why comparison is bad for mental health, and that's a whole other conversation. But for the idea of ambition, it is actually an exercise in comparison. The second thing I would say is we build companies to sell in Canada, and that is not how the most ambitious people in the world build companies. They build to change industries, they build to IPO, they build to be the acquiring company, not the acquired company, and that is most certainly not how the average Canadian entrepreneur speaks about themselves. So I could go on and on about this, but it is a massive problem. I would say that I have spoken to a lot of people in the last year. The number of people that I think I've spoken to that are trying to become the best in the world, I could count on one hand. Most people are just trying to get by.
Jim, I got to pass it to you as somebody who's been thriving in the ecosystem for so many years. What's your view on flagging Canadian ambition?
I love what Catherine says. I live in Guelph. Whenever I started to think I was doing well, I would drive to Toronto and see those companies. And then after I sold my business, I actually moved to New York. When you move to New York, you realize, gee, you're kind of a small cog. The other thing I'll say is you become the average of the 5 or 10 people that you spend your time with. So that is on the scale that Catherine's talking about.
So aside from spending time in New York, what other recommendations and kind of building your peer group? How did you? Was it simply you traveled to Toronto and that's where your ambition came from? And maybe a little bit about your time at BlackBerry in terms of just while that company might have ended up not where everyone wanted it, it certainly was not for a lack of ambition early on, I think.
Well, the thing about BlackBerry is BlackBerry could not have been successful in Canada. And a lot of success has to do with you just simply can't do it unless you do it on a world scale. So you couldn't be a major player unless you were successful globally. The problem we have sometimes in Canada is you can actually be successful. I have a company that makes snowplows. I could probably be pretty successful and only ever sell snowplows in Canada. Matter of fact, it's not a very good global market. I mean, it's good for the north part of the United States, but you don't sell a lot in Mexico. You have to fire the sales team down there. They're just not doing a good job.
The Mexico snowplow business is not a good one to enter. Look, I'd like to change tack a little bit and talk about building physical products, which is sort of a big part of the theme today. Your respective companies have a strong focus on physical products, which is somewhat rare, maybe even more so in a university entrepreneurship ecosystem where there's a lot of software, obviously, and a lot of kind of deep science, but not necessarily manufactured goods. So I'd like to take advantage of your expertise, and maybe I'll start with you, Jim. What are some of the unique challenges that come with manufacturing and scaling and marketing physical goods compared to digital goods?
Well, I mean, the biggest obvious one is logistics. Everything, and to some extent, it's capital, but that's a good barrier to entry. People can't mess with you when you've got huge capital. At the end of the day, everyone loves technology products, but they still need physical products, so there's still a huge market. There's a lack of sexiness in physical products, so people say, wait a minute, you can't be a startup entrepreneur, you're not sexy enough, and with boring physical product, and then they go and buy a lot of boring physical product. So I kind of pivoted a lot from doing technology to doing old-fashioned businesses that make money, just smokestack, and you can still do well. But you have all the challenges. You need to hire the staff. You need to distribute the product and whatnot. And people underestimate the cost of the logistics. Well, in appliances, 35% of the cost of an appliance is moving it. It's a lot of cost. I mean, you think about the container cost to get parts in, the trucking cost to get parts out, the cost to get it delivered to your house. I mean, by the time I deliver that fridge to your house, that's a high cost.
Especially because he carries it himself. Kat, I'd love to turn to you. Your take on, I think the journey with CheerTex, and specifically sort of what are the learnings in scaling that business and the challenges of shipping and branding and selling physical products?
So I think that what Jim said in terms of, the barriers to entry when you actually do manage to set up something that makes a physical product, particularly if you've taken the leap and actually done a substantial part of that supply chain in-house, is a huge defense to other companies. However, the capital world, let's call it the venture capital world, even though there's lots of others that are active in this space, doesn't really see it that way. It's almost like if you say that you have anything that is physical about what you're doing, it's this massive detractor to the idea of the investment. They, as venture capitalists, will look at that and very often say, oh, well, you should get that done with traditional financing on the actual capital side. We'll only finance the quote unquote R&D, which is the human side. And you have to kind of do this dance to figure out how you're going to capitalize it. So I think one thing that I very fundamentally believe is that we cannot be a society that doesn't make things. If we become a society that doesn't make things, I do not believe we will be durable or globally competitive at all. So I think our jobs and our livelihoods are dependent on us figuring out how we make things and how we make things that are globally competitive, which I think means that they have to be done in a unique way. They have to be defensible. Beyond just capital, they have to be defensible through IP and a whole variety of different things. But the capital needs to start viewing real things as fundable, as things that they want to put their capital behind. And I think in order to do that, we have to create more success stories of people that have actually been able to do this to be able to change the narrative of what's happening right now. Obviously, there's huge challenges with what's happening in the valuations for early stage companies on the software side with all of the decrease in multiples, but I think that's one of the best things that's ever happened for people that have physical product technology businesses, because there's starting to be more of an equalization than there was certainly in 2022, and you can actually get looked at by some of these forms of capital when they're not just being super opportunistic, AI aside. So all of that comes down to say, like, at the end of the day, I think that we have to be invested in physical businesses. I believe they are hugely defensible. I believe they are massively in society's benefit, but we need innovators, we need technology institutes like this to start talking about making things and manufacturing and physical intellectual property as being benefits to society. I like to think back to, crazy things like semiconductors and how are we going to produce the future of electricity. And like, these are things that Canada could, if it took really long-term, highly capital inefficient ways of getting there, be a superpower in, but we have to get behind these things as things that we actually want to be investing in, and not just putting it into the next web app that might get a big multiple boost and get us a short-term influx in capital because it sells to Google. And that's really, I think, the rat race that we're in right now.
Your comments about kind of the venture capital hesitation to invest in companies building physical products, is that a localized to Canada phenomenon, or is that something that you think applies to VC in general?
All VC in general. However, I do think not that Canada's capital is very has much of a risk appetite. In fact, it has almost no risk appetite. But if it could be a capital market that was one of the early leaders in actually making investments in some of these physical technologies, I think it could be a differentiator. But no, it's a global capital challenge. Obviously, the things that are happening in the US right now around tariffs and supply chain are making a lot of investors rethink that, and also making a lot of big companies rethink their strategies when it comes to manufacturing. But it's a big challenge.
And Jim, I'd love to turn to you and your thoughts on what's missing for better investment, maybe a better investment climate in Canada for building physical goods manufacturing.
Well, Canada is more conservative than the United States, and that is just sort of a fact. So, and there's a lot less capital available in Canada, and the United States has much more capital. I think it goes back to my comment where manufacturing isn't sexy, and that therefore it doesn't attract the lofty valuations and whatnot. But if you look around in the whole world, I don't want to bring it back to being hyper-local. Look at all the people who are successful in making most of the money. Most of the people, they're doing something physical. And there's good barriers to entry to it. And I am not that fussed with availability of capital, but maybe it's the way I've chosen to run my business. And I run it a little conservatively, have high equity base and not much leverage.
That's great. I want to switch gears. We're getting close to time where we're going to start going to Q&A from the audience. But before that, there's an obvious kind of elephant in the room. Maybe a donkey is the better metaphor, related to the U.S. election and the current incoming leader of the election and some announcement of potential tariffs. And as two producers of goods, primarily, I would imagine both of you are selling in the U.S. as a main market. Jim, I'd love to get your take first, and then to Kat on, how do you absorb this most recent announcement, and in general the kind of uncertainty related to what's going on in the U.S. now for Canadian producers and exporters?
So I don't do politics, and so I'm not making political commentary. But your comment is it's about uncertainty, and that makes it very difficult for anyone. Because if you manufacture anything, we can't even start up a line to have product coming off. It'll take a year. And investments are done on decade time horizons. I look at it from a competitive advantage and what do the competitors have and not have. And so I was not fussed about the China tariffs because everything we buy from China, everyone else buys from China, and so we're at no competitive disadvantage. The problem we have with the current 25% proposed on Canada is we do some production in Canada, We actually have factories in the States as well, so we're somewhat protected, but we're creating an inefficiency. If you're making 100,000 wine coolers of a certain size, you don't want to make 90,000 in the US and 10,000 in Canada because all your molds and dyes and jigs and everything, you want to make 100,000 and ship 10,000 one way and 90,000 the other way. So we're creating an inefficiency that adds to the cost of goods. That will be inflationary. There's no way it can't be inflationary. And I will start producing some products in the States that I don't now, because if the price is 25% higher, but the consumers are going to pay something. And it's going to reflect back in inflation. And it's not going to be healthy long term.
Kat, would you add anything?
Yeah, I think everything you're saying is definitely aligned with how we're thinking about it. I think the biggest problem is the uncertainty. The fact that you as a business leader can't really plan. Like, if we at least knew what it was, we could figure out how we plan the most efficient version of our business for both ourselves, our investors, and our consumers, given that. It's the fact that every time you open your phone, it's a slightly different interpretation. I mean, we as a company had just wrapped our heads around how we were going to set ourselves up for USMCA, and like how we were going to be able to move all of our sourcing to the US for next year so that we could have a USMCA compliant product. And now I don't know if I should actually press go on that order for all of that US fiber, because maybe our products still won't even qualify for USMCA even if I press go. So now I'm like, okay, well, do I stick with the Korean supplier on that? Do I move it to the US? Do I have to look at opening a temporary knitting factory? But will knitting be enough? Is it actually going to be a fiber-based tariff? Like, I just have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. And because of that, it's actually leading us to gratefully, it's leading us to just stick to the current plan, because changing course has so much additional risk. We introduce a lot of uncertainty into our own planning, and really we just are focused ourselves on how do we reduce the cost of our product as much as possible. And if there's going to be an additional 25% placed on us, we need to reduce the cost of our product an additional 25%. And like, that's not a wonderful way to have to look at the world, but it's like currently how we're looking at it. It starts to make you think, is the European market actually the more attractive market? Do we need to start building up a larger customer base there? Is this going to apply to just B2B orders, like is what happens right now with USMCA? So it's only our large orders because the consumer level shipments are exempt because they're under $800? Or is this going to apply across all D2C orders? So should we move to a D2C business in the US? And I have absolutely no idea. And quite frankly, I'm pretty sure I won't have a good idea for a very long time, until the actual legislation is out. I don't think you can actually know what's going to happen. So the best thing I think that we can do, like we as in SRTX right now, is I never thought in my entrepreneurial life lobbying would become anything of any real importance to me, but genuinely the closer that we can get to US representatives that are actually making these decisions and figure out what Canada has that the US needs, that we can actually, make a really strong case for why this is not in their interest. Because at the end of the day, it's fair that they are defending their own interests, but how do we make a collaborative version of this, maybe not a 25% tariff, make sense for them as well. And we have a lot of things that the US needs. We have minerals, we have power, we have consumers. How do we use that to kind of bargain our way to a more certain future? And really certainty is the thing I want more than anything else right now. So that's a lot, but the word tariffs comes up every day in my life right now and has a very substantial impact on everything that we do. It's quite intense, actually.
Well, and speaking of lobbying, we need the Canadian government to put counter tariffs on. That's what helps my playing field. Because if we could at least get all of the Canadian business, that helps us in that regard. The other thing we have to realize with Trump, what he says and what actually happens may or may not be. So we heard what he said, but that's not legislation yet. And will it become legislation? And I can't imagine that the car manufacturers are sitting around saying, oh yeah, well, that's fine with us because they're North American integrated and they've got a lot of power, a lot of jobs down there.
And is, somebody for whom this isn't your kind of first rodeo, what's the advice to entrepreneurs? Is it sort of, Kat mentioning stay the course because why change when you're not sure what the change will be? And what would you advise?
Well, the beauty of being entrepreneurs is this creates some change, and change is where entrepreneurs win. We totally win when there's a change as long as you can be nimble and adaptable. So if you can be nimble and adaptable, and if you're an entrepreneur, and if you're small, you will totally and absolutely win because the status quo, the big companies' status quo are the ones that will tend to get more hurt because we change slower and we can't change. You can't change. I went to her Kat's factory. She's not moving that to Michigan tomorrow. Like it's a big deal, right? It's not a little deal.
Okay, let's pivot into...
Just one thing I would add on that is the other kind of stay the course reasoning for us right now is like, even if it was certain today, I don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. Like, I don't know if this is going to reverse. And am I going to set up a multi-million-dollar plant that's going to take me 2 years to commission, to turn it on, and then have to reverse that again? And, like, at the end of the day, I think we have to think longer term as a country in the chaos that is what's happening right now. And I think the only way that we can think longer term as a country here is to be very strategic about, what we actually have to give to this relationship with the US so that we can become partners and not really just kind of at the whim of whatever legislation of the day is.
I think that's good advice. Before I go to questions from the audience, one more question for each of you, which is what are you most excited about or optimistic for as a Canadian entrepreneur right now looking forward? Like what drives you to get up in the morning despite all the challenges that you guys face, which are many? I'd love to know sort of what drives you to keep going. And maybe Jim, I'll start with you.
What I'm most optimistic on, what's happening in the United States actually will help us in Canada long term. Like the exchange rate already changed last night. So the exchange rate changes. That means our labor cost is less and we can compete better. If the United States does get rid of all of the recent immigrants and stop the border, they will have nobody to do the work. And we will have people to do the work. And physical goods needs physical people, even if you're highly automated. And I also like change because I live in very, very competitive industry. Competitive industries, you kind of have a status quo, and the only way you gain is steal a little bit of market share from somebody else. Really, really tough. This can create quantum changes, and I think actually we are better positioned than our competitors. We're a small company. We do about 400 million, and competitors do 10 billion, 30 billion. When you're a $30 billion company, I can go in and take a little market, 50 million, they don't care. And so I like that size, nimbleness, and I'm quite entrepreneurial for a small, or I'm not a big company, but I'm not a small company, and so I'm more entrepreneurial than the big guys is my experience.
And Kat?
Yeah, so I think that for a while there, maybe it's because I was just not thinking about the right things. I had a lot of concerns about Canada's long-term competitiveness and how we were going to basically, continue to live as a developed nation, and what are we going to do for jobs, what are we going to do for competitiveness. And I think that what's happened in the last 4 years is the biggest opportunity that we could have as a country. We are at the center of so many tectonic shifts that are occurring right now in terms of where things are made, in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of automation, in terms of, people having a crisis of, where do we invest, in terms of just so many things are up in the air that were not up in the air 10, 15 years ago. And that is when you have an opportunity to grasp and really become a leader in something. And my hope right now is that as Canadians, we can see these shifts that are happening and really become leaders in a few of these spaces. There's so much opportunity right now. It's in everything from manufacturing to energy to artificial intelligence to bio, based things that we never thought would happen in medicine if you just look back 5 years. And I think CDL has done a really good job at just giving Canadian entrepreneurs information about all of these new things that are happening that entrepreneurs in other countries don't have as ready access to, because we're sitting on top of what CDL is trying to do, which is show us all of these emerging fields. So I am very optimistic that we can capture these opportunities, but the window is so small. There are parts of the world, China certainly one of them, that moves so much faster than us. So much faster than us. They do what we do in 5 years in a month. And I see it in our procurement, I see it in basically everything that we're doing right now. And basically I'll go talk to a German company, I'll talk to a Chinese company, and I'll look at 28 months versus 3 months. And I'll get an answer in 90 days, and I'll get an answer by the time I wake up in the morning. And that's actually the pace that other parts of the world are moving at, and we do not have an urgent enough culture right now to go after this. So opportunity, tremendous. We could be the Western leader based on everything we have, from people to natural resources, but we have to treat this as a crisis. Someone is going to win, and right now it is not us, and we have to change that. And I think I work in my life with a lot of urgency, and if there's anything that I would like to see more of from just honestly the entire Western world, it's urgency. We're so complacent, and it is breaking us in terms of our competitiveness. And when you get to manufactured products, that complacency kills you. At least in software, you can do real-time updates. In manufacturing, if you're gonna just sit on your laurels, it's gonna be literally 20 months for every iteration, and you cannot afford that as a startup. So I could go on and on about this forever, but it's a wonderful time to be alive in Canada, but in 10 years, we could totally miss the window.
It's a powerful call to action. I love it. It's always a pleasure to have you both here. I'm going to do some quick hit questions because we are out of time. I'm getting the red time, but I'm allowed to pick my favorite ones from above. And so maybe what I'd start with is Jim, and I'm thinking about your current companies, maybe your past ones. There's a question here. There's a couple questions around sort of approach or the importance of intellectual property and protecting it. I'd love to get your take on early stage founders right now. How much effort and energy should they be spending on that? How do you think about IP and its importance?
I'm probably completely counterculture. Ideas are a dime a dozen. It's implementation. So I have all kinds of little entrepreneurs, sign an 18-page NDA, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to steal your idea. It's implementation that counts. It's not the actual IP, that's my personal experience. I mean, I signed a huge NDA to tour Catherine's factory. It was an awesome factory. And because I did that, that's the only reason why I didn't start a factory to compete with her. Except if you tour her factory, you realize you can't do that. It's a big deal. She has more protection than the piece of paper. Don't worry.
Yeah, the way that I look at it is moat building. So IP and that NDA is one of 100 things that you're doing to make it hard for someone else to compete against you. Just the sheer capital you invest is another thing in the moat to make it hard for someone to compete with you. The patents we have are just another thing that's going to hopefully deter someone from competing with us. The fact that we're vertically integrated, so it's not just one thing you have to figure out, all of the things is another thing. The fact that we have access to green power and you'd have to figure out how to get access to green power at the same price we do is just another reason we're trying to make it hard for you. The fact that we used to be in a wonderful location for the US used to be another deterrent, doesn't exist anymore. But all of these different things, not one of them is going to be enough. Like, never will one of them be enough. But my hope is that if we can design companies that have massive moats, and moats will look different for every company, but we need to build companies with moats around them. And I think that there's things that entrepreneurs can do to build moats, but there's also things that governments and communities can do to help build moats around companies as well. And I'm not saying that I'm looking for like government intervention or things like that, but it's incredible how much the price of power and access to power actually plays a role in whether or not I can build this business. It's incredible, what tariffs will do to whether I'm allowed to build this business. So we not only have to, look at how's the entrepreneur thinking about it, but how is the whole ecosystem designing to build companies that can move quickly and can actually compete. Another thing would be, can we actually create industrial zones that maybe have different tax schemes that are actually going to encourage more innovation? Like, there's a whole bunch of different things that other parts of the world are doing, whether they work or don't work, but we're not being particularly creative in how we help people move faster. Our permit times take forever. We don't help people find ways to cut through the red tape. Like, how do we do this? Or else, again, places where they are doing this will win.
I think that's a great way to end this portion only. Now, John is going to come up, and I'm going to swap microphone with him. But thank you both.
Jim and Kat, you're not off the hook yet. Good afternoon. My name is John French. I am the Director, University of Toronto Entrepreneurship, or UTE. UTE is the connective tissue or the glue for all of the incredible programming that happens across our 3 campuses here at U of T. We actually have 12 campus accelerators at the University of Toronto. We will properly be thanking Christian, Kat, and Jim shortly, but we've got some more work for Kat and Jim to do. And we actually have 4 companies, many of you might have seen them on your way in, who are moving fast and making things. We've given them a really tough assignment. For those of you who are founders, you know how tricky it is when you've only got 1 minute and 1 slide. That's what we've given them. So they've got 1 minute to share what they're working on with you. And then we have a couple minutes for Jim and Kat to provide some really quick insights, ask them some questions, guidance, and then we'll move on. After the 4 are done, we will draw for this incredible prize here. Dean Yip, it's not filled with beverages. And then we'll have an opportunity to network a little bit more afterwards. And so our first venture is Sophia from AltPro.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sofia Bonilla, and I'm the founder and CEO of AltPro Advantage. We are creating the next generation of pet food with alternative proteins and novel ingredients from insects, algae, and fungi. So the problem that we're addressing is that the pet food industry is over-reliant on traditional animal proteins, and that's a problem for both pets and the planet. By removing livestock, poultry, and fish ingredients, we can reduce 96% of food allergies in pets and up to 70% of the environmental impact of pet food. We currently have an insect protein line available for purchase on our website, and we're in over 80 stores across Canada, including Well.ca and Healthy Planet. So if you have a dog, please support us. And yeah, we have samples outside, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
So I'm very excited to have my dog try these out. I got some treats for him. So maybe just in line with the conversation that we just had, what is the crazy ambitious version of your company kind of changing the world or changing the corner of the world that you want to change on a global scale? What could that look like?
Yeah, I love that question and what you were saying, because we really have this vision of becoming the leaders in the alternative protein pet food space. So you see these massive companies, Royal Canin, Mars, like using traditional animal proteins, and they have this huge portfolio of products. So we want to build that, but with alternative proteins, so using insects, algae, and fungi. And that includes using, formulation tools so that we can formulate great products, but that are also reducing the environmental impact. It includes building products like the ones that we're doing right now, but also developing new ingredients that we can incorporate in future pet food.
Have you ever considered being the manufacturer or being a partner or like almost a co-packer for some of these really large brands to get the scale?
Yeah, 100%. So I wanted to have our own manufacturing facility. It's something that we're considering in the future. The thing with pet food and the challenge that we came across is that to build a brand, you need different formats. And so it makes it very difficult for a small company to have different lines of products. So with volume, we can definitely consider that more seriously.
Has there been any interest from, like, have you spoken to some of these big pet food brands? Like, do you think that they would, like, buy an alternative protein product from you or, like, do something if you had the lines?
For the largest brands, I don't think so because they have, like their volumes are massive. But I can see, like, medium brands looking at the kind of products that we build, yeah.
So why would they not just do what you do?
I think just because of what you were saying, large companies move much slower than smaller companies. So we see that in the products that we develop, it's just very difficult to source ingredients like out of, like they need tons and tons of ingredient volume to get one product developed. While we can work with emerging ingredients because we have a lower volume at this point. So I think we're just faster and more innovative.
Great, I think that's time.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Sophia. Next up, we have Connor from Just Vertical. And we'll let Jim go first for this one on the questions.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Connor Tidd, and I am one of the co-founders at Just Vertical, where we are building the future of food by bringing it closer to the point of consumption. We've got over 2,000 farmers around the world using our vertical farming technology to grow their own food and reduce costs. So whether that's a fresh, crispy head of lettuce in your kitchen in the dead of winter, or the Red Deer Food Bank out in Alberta, where we just installed a 1,000 tomato plant farm, or a farm in Connecticut where we're doing 100,000 heads of lettuce and providing local employment opportunities, we are on a mission to make sure that the price of food is accessible to everybody. There's no reason in 2024 a head of lettuce in northern Canada should cost 10 times as much, or a community in Baltimore doesn't have access to fresh food. So I invite you all to join us on our mission to bring fresh food to everybody in a healthier, cleaner way that's better for you and the planet.
So what's the barrier to entry? Why would anyone else just not do what you do?
Yeah, so I think it was a great point earlier about the moat. So we've got the IP, we've got the knowledge, we've got the legwork ahead where we can actually grow these plants denser on a square foot basis than any of our competitors and faster. So there's a bit of a knowledge and cost barrier there for other companies.
How do you get consumers to change their behavior?
Yeah, great question. We're essentially a new product category on the consumer side. So there's been a lot of education. We've been fortunate that we've got some very, very well-funded competitors who do a lot of that education for us, and we tend to swoop in right at the end and just offer a bit of a superior product there. But changing consumer behavior is not easy. On the commercial side, it's a little easier because you can make the cost argument and people are willing to sit down and listen to a PowerPoint. So we're fortunate that we have both the consumer and commercial B2B sides of the business.
I love the product, I love the direction, and I do think that there could be a pivot that this is the new way that people do their food. And if you can do it at a price point that makes that you have a cost competitive thing, then it's a total slam dunk on the commercial restaurant or because they're primarily economically driven.
Absolutely, thank you.
I'm just kind of thinking about this because obviously, even at a national level right now, food security is a huge priority. Obviously, food cost is a huge priority. From a distribution standpoint, obviously, D2C is very cost prohibitive. It's a very hard channel to scale these days in particular, and certainly we've felt that firsthand. But this is probably like not a clear channel in terms of where you would sell. Like, obviously like the home hardwares or whatever, like, or, Home Depots come to mind. But I'm almost wondering, like, could you like pitch this to like Loblaws or like really big grocery chains where like I can kind of go and like buy my pods or buy my system, instead of buying groceries? Because it's almost like I would want to see this when I'm already in the mindset of buying food, but then be like, oh, I can grab that lettuce, or I can buy this, or I can buy both this time because next time I'm not going to have to buy the lettuce. Like, and probably, yes, you could look at it from a grocery store, oh, well, it's taking away their customer, but I think from a marketing standpoint and a communication with their customer standpoint, there could be a lot of benefits. Have you considered something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was part of the original vision was to do essentially a live salad bar in your Loblaws, because that's the frustration of everybody. You go in and the produce sucks and you're paying way too much for it. Then COVID hit and everybody got really weirded out about food. But we started to see a resurgence. So the wall.
What if you like sold the system though?
Yeah.
In gross, or even like there's like small versions of the system.
Yeah. So that was the idea, is that they would see it and see it in action and get it. We haven't found traction yet on the grocery store side.
Yeah.
But what we have seen since the resurgence is actually the system out there is going to a catering event after this, where they've rented it for a day. And they're using it as a live salad bar, and that's exactly it. It's a distribution channel for us.
Yeah.
For people to actually see the product in action, and as a consumer business, to be paid to do your marketing is always.
Because like my mind was going to what you were saying out there, where it's like the really, really big installs of this are kind of capital prohibitive. They're kind of one-off. You go and you do all of these bids. The D2C has its own whole set of challenges, but I feel like there is, to Jim's point, this huge opportunity, this huge potential demand, and I don't know. I just feel like there's some creative, either retail level, salad bar, catering, I don't know what it is, where if you could just get the model right, there's this massive scale effect. Like, you just think of the number of grocery stores, or, I think of Freshii. Like, what if Freshii installed like a live salad bar in addition to their regular salad, like at the store? I don't know. I think there's some creativity you could do in terms of channel that could like really help this take off, but also differentiate you and build that moat bigger around some of your competitors.
Yeah, and what we've done on this side, on the consumer side, is we call it the produce payback promise. Our marketing guys at the back there, if anyone's got a better way to express this, anytime we sell an indoor garden, we give you everything you need in the box to grow its value back in food. So you spend $700, we give you everything you need in that box to grow $700 worth of food, so that these gardens do pay for themselves within a year. Then you start saving money. And it's been a real challenge communicating that, but we are open to new ways to do it, because I think once people understand that it's fun, it looks good, but it makes economical sense, that's where you get the explosive growth.
Okay, and we have to cut you off there, Connor. I'm struggling. I want to let this keep going. This is such great back and forth, great insights.
Thank you.
Thank you, Connor. And as an aside, in this building on the 7th floor, we have our on-ramp co-working and community space for entrepreneurs who are looking for access to a 24/7 hot desk, kitchen, mail delivery, access to meeting rooms, and we actually try to walk the talk, so there is a Just Vertical unit in the on-ramp. Please find me or someone from the UTE team if you want to learn more about that on-ramp space. And next up, flown in from Costa Rica, Luana from Huesos.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today, an amazing opportunity. I'm Luana, I'm the social impact coordinator at Huesos, and I'll just start with a question. So did you guys know that the fast fashion industry generates enough waste to fill landfills and oceans, and consumes enough water to feed the population of Toronto twice every year? Well, that's where we come in. At Huesos, we transform waste into opportunities. For example, from this retired airplane seat to this bag. But we're more than just a bag. We're about redefining circular economy, empowering women, and uplifting communities. Behind every product is a story of transformation and impact. Together, we drive impactful change for a sustainable future. We're using business as a tool for change and education as a driving force. Join us in driving change, one upcycled product at a time. We're wearing the change. wear Warsaws. Thank you.
Awesome. So I think it's very, very cool what you guys are trying to do. I do think companies are desperately looking for ways to offload their waste. So I don't think that supply is going to be your challenge, but certainly the demand side is challenging. And I think it goes back to, the same conversation we were having about vertical farming. How do you acquire customers in this day and age with the prices of meta going up and there not being really, really clear ways that you could acquire new customers? You have some really interesting things you were mentioning out there on how you're actually able to take in Southwest Air waste and then actually sell them back the product, which I think is really fascinating. Do you have any other channel ideas that you've been thinking of how you can scale up the demand?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for your question. For sure, we're trying to also educate business on the importance of social impact and also the circular economy, sustainable gifts and everything. So we try to find different channels and different business that are willing to change their practice to gift something more sustainable that will have a true impact. Also retail spaces, right now we're just doing it in Costa Rica, but we plan to expand it internationally. But ethical retail spaces like pop-up shops, hotels, souvenir shops, because it's also about the history of Costa Rica. This is a Costa Rican product, and we want also to empower the people that we work with. And lastly, also, I wanted to mention about regenerative tourism. We work doing itineraries as well that not only showcases the history and the process of Warsaws, but also the communities that we work with. And this week, actually, we just got a grant for $20,000 from the UN Tourist Foundation that we partner up with Expedia, so also through this channel.
So the moat you're talking about is a moat of brand. And I would definitely play on that because people understand what you do. They will pay a premium and it will make their product be cooler. So I really like that. My only other suggestion is I would worry about the logistics cost of getting the product returned. Although you'll have an unlimited amount of product to return, I don't think you're gonna have a problem getting the raw material. It's getting the product, the raw material to you. I have a reasonably large, we call it remanufacturing facility for appliances. We do a couple 100,000 pieces a year, and the cost is the cost of logistics and shipping.
If I can mention on that, I think our biggest obstacle at this moment will be not coming to us, but then selling. Shipping away to the US, it's very costly when you come from Costa Rica. So this is something that we have to figure out as well. We're in the process of doing it, but for sure.
And the other thing, I don't think you've hit it yet, but I think you will soon. Sustainability is certainly becoming a much broader concept, and all of the emissions that are going to happen in waste getting to you and then waste or final product going out, you're probably going to need to do some real life cycle assessments to determine is this actually net better than disposing of the. And I don't know, I'm obviously hopeful that the answer is yes, this is net better, but I think that you really have to eventually be very science-based in your ability to say, we took in this happened in the entire life cycle, and it was a net benefit to the ecosystem, because also regulation is becoming extremely high, and my guess is that even calling this sustainable beyond sustainable labor practices within the next few years is going to require some very significant science-backed data to be able to prove out that you're actually doing that. So you probably want to get ahead of that before the legislation actually hits. And then your waste is quite complicated. You almost have to do a separate life cycle assessment on every single input material that you get. So if you could get really, really good at doing life cycle assessments, that might also be another stream of revenue, because all of these different brands want to know what the life cycle assessment on them doing something with their waste would be, and maybe it would help them prioritize which waste to do something with. And maybe the waste that is already in South America should come to you, or maybe H&M's waste in this area should actually be transformed in that area. And I think it's wonderful what you're doing for Costa Rica, but if you actually double down on growing this into something massive, my guess is that you're gonna want to work with localized communities in places where the waste is and where the customer is, so that you can actually get the environmental footprint down to where it probably will need to be.
And I need to cut us off there. Sorry, Luana. Great comments, great insights. And our final venture is Stephanie and Myco Futures.
Hello. Imagine the future where materials are sustainable, ethical, and circular. At Myco Futures, we believe that this is how we do it, by growing it from the ground up, quite literally. The fashion industry is responsible for 10% of global carbon emissions, and it's at a tipping point. The transition to circular and sustainable materials isn't a nice to have, it's inevitable. Mycelium-based leather is our solution, a premium, high-performing alternative that is grown from the roots of mushrooms. And unlike traditional leathers and synthetics, it's animal-free, plastic-free, and non-toxic, leveraging indoor precision agriculture and our proprietary green chemistry. This is a perfect solution for forward-thinking brands who are ready to be leaders in sustainability. The shift to circular is happening right now. So we invite you to join us in our mission to create a future where innovation, style, and nature thrive together, with Myco Futures leading the way.
So my question is, are the mushrooms edible and then you just use the roots? Is that what you do?
No, unfortunately. We are actually huge supporters of food security, and while it pained us to not actually grow a food product, we grow just the root system in a dense biomass because the fruiting body, which is the mushroom, actually damages the surface. So we control the environment to prevent that.
Perfect. I think one question you're going to have to answer for consumers is, I always had the impression that leather was a byproduct and therefore is going to happen anyways, whether or not you make the purse of it. How do you answer a consumer that thinks that way?
Of course, and I do love this question because that is the obvious answer, but the beef, dairy, and cattle industries are very complex, and so it's not a straight one cow becomes beef and their skin becomes leather. There's so much leather out there, most of it actually gets destroyed. It's not at a high enough standard, and what you're getting right now is maybe a little bit of leather or a type of composite leather from waste, and it's covered with plastic. That's why things can be hot pink, purple, smooth, have faux crocodile, because there's always going to be a corrective coating put on top that in the end is a fossil fuel-based material.
So I love what you're doing. I think that this is something that is a long time coming. Literally, there have been people working on this for a long time. And it's going to really be a race to see who can figure out how to scale this and then how to scale that at the right unit economics over time. So I think more just in terms of like pitch feedback, what I would say is really trying to figure out how you can tell the story of scale, how you can tell the story of unit economics, what this is going to cost you to produce, what you're going to be able to sell this from. I remember seeing that you had LOIs with big brands. Talk about that. Like, get us excited about how this can scale and why you're the one that's going to actually be able to scale this.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, Jim, Kat, now we can release you. Thank you. A round of applause for Jim and Kat. It's not easy to get up here and present in an auditorium when you only have a minute, so congratulations as well to the four founders. You did a fantastic job. Before we close today's festivities, I'd like to highlight a couple of opportunities for those entrepreneurs in the audience. One is a reminder that the Desjardins Startup Prize, the university's largest pitch competition, where we give away over $100,000 in non-dilutive funding. The applications will close this Friday, so make sure you get your applications in. Every team must have at least one student or recent grad from the University of Toronto. And I would be remiss if I didn't echo Leah in thanking our friends and partners from Desjardins, Wesley, Morella, Ben. Thank you so much for being here and for your continued support. We look forward to picking the winners of this pitch competition in March during Entrepreneurship Week on March the 6th. The second point to make is that we really believe in walking the talk when it comes to supporting our startup companies. And so if we can move to the next slide. If you enjoyed hearing about the 4 businesses that actually have physical products in market, we're collaborating with the bookstore next Tuesday and Wednesday to offer the U of T Startup Holiday Marketplace. And so from 10 till 5 bookstore hours, we have 15 companies. And if you're looking to buy a stocking stuffer for a gift for someone special in your life, you're going to be able to leave the bookstore with these products in your hand or in your bag. So please come by and support those companies, walk the talk in supporting our startups, and also add some really cool gifts to the repertoire that you won't be able to find anywhere else. And then to end the holiday startup market, we will have our community social. This is a quarterly get-together. It will happen from 4 to 6. It will actually be in the bookstore, which is this beautiful second-floor space with high ceilings. I love this event because there's not a lot of structure to it. There's not a bunch of talking heads or formal remarks. But in the middle, what we do is we pass around a microphone. And if you're a startup and you are hiring, or you're actively fundraising, or you're looking for a board member, or you just have a milestone that you want to celebrate, you have an opportunity to share that with the audience. If you are an accelerator, and I've seen a few of our accelerator staff in the room, and you've got an opportunity, you can speak to it. If you're a corporate partner, if you're a community partner that supports the ecosystem here, you've got an opportunity to share that with the community. All are welcome. And so if you haven't RSVP'd for that event, we would love to see you there next Wednesday. And then finally, mark your calendars for Entrepreneurship Week, which runs the 3rd to the 7th of March. This is, I always call it the Cannes Film Festival, or the TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, for all things startup. We'll have about 15 events across our tri-campus. Some of them will be in this beautiful building, the Schwartz-Riesman Innovation Campus. Some of them will be virtual, and others will be at our Mississauga, Scarborough campus, or other places on the St. George campus. We always have a really impressive high-profile keynote speaker. Stay tuned, more to come on that. And then in this building, we have the True Blue Expo, where we have about 60 booths, and you get to talk to the entrepreneurs and the community partners in this building. And so it's kind of like the 4 we have out there, but amplified. We'd love to see you there for Entrepreneurship Week, which also features our Desjardins Speaker Series and Startup Prize competition. On behalf of UTE, I want to thank everyone for coming. You can hear and see there's a lot going on in this ecosystem. And to share some final thoughts and closing remarks, I'd like to introduce someone who's a huge advocate and champion for the entrepreneurial ecosystem, the Dean of the Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering, Chris Yip.
Do I get an entry? Why don't you do the rap? I'll do the rap. Chris can do the rap. All right, we're like totally ad-libbing this now. So wait a second. So what am I? How am I raffling it?
Just say, spin the wheel and watch what happens.
Oh, jeez. All right. Spin the wheel and see what happens. So do I go like this? It's like a virtual. There we go. Wow, that's it. That's impressive. So. Oh, there we go, Connor. Now, seeing as with the university, I was hoping, because I'm from engineering, that there would be appropriate beverages in here, but I guess I'm looking at Derek, and it's like, I'm pretty sure I can't actually do that. We'll talk later about stocking that for you. Anyways, so that was impromptu. Well, first off, thank you everyone for being here. I want to thank Kat, Jim, and Christian for leading. I came in a little bit late, but leading an absolutely fascinating conversation about both the challenges of what's happening globally right now, but then you said the timing of the opportunity, right? There's a narrow window to act, right? And to take advantage of that. And I completely agree with the whole point about fast, right? Acting fast and not being complacent and really trying to do something quickly. We said at a university, I'm looking at Derek. Universities are not fast, and I want to do stuff fast. And I think some people know me within engineering. We try to accelerate stuff and maybe break the rules a little bit. And then I get a little conversation from the provost every so often. But we want to try to make things happen quickly, and that's really the key to innovation, the key to moving things forward. And I think the perspective now on going global, getting out there, making that impact, I love the pitch that you were down in Costa Rica. I mean, that's a different angle on being down there and doing that, but I think this is part of what's so important. Congrats to the 4 startups that presented. Absolutely fascinating topics that you're bringing. I like sort of the 3 sort of food analogies that were in there. Just wonderful, and I think the questions were really on point in terms of how you guys can push those initiatives forward. So congratulations. I think they were just absolutely phenomenal. Huge thank you to Desjardins for the speaker series, for sponsoring this. I think this is really an amazing opportunity. Support the community, for our students, for the entrepreneurs to get out there to learn more about what's going on and how to accelerate their opportunities moving forward. It's interesting, this morning I literally got an email from one of our startups, Xpan, Zayed Addo, who just sort of gave, it was a big one. I don't know, Derek, did you get that email? No, I'll forward it to you. It's a big email from Zayed about what's happened with Xpan since he started that company, I'm gonna say like almost 10 years ago, in the original on-ramp space. Now he's not up here now, he's actually got a bigger, I think, operation up in Markham. But really to talk about how the ecosystems help support these initiatives and help them grow and where they are today. Coming from engineering, I was a little disappointed there weren't any engineering startups here, but that's okay. Oh, one, there we go. But it's been fascinating to see how the hatchery, as an example, has helped to do that as part of the larger ecosystem within U of T and really tried to drive these things and the support we can do. So again, thank you everyone for being here. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I look forward to the networking. I think the conversations are going to continue. Lots of stuff going forward. And Connor, we will figure out how to stock this with appropriate beverages for you later. Anyways, thank you everyone for being here today.